We're back, and Eric, you've got this Andy Wood / EVH board complete. And I must say, for as much as we digressed in sort of the aesthetic,
we spent a lot of time talking about the casino floors.
Yeah.
Maybe too long. Our apologies, everybody.
Yeah, let's don't send letters. We're contrite.
Was that they frequently will put patterns on the ceiling as well, so you keep your gaze in this vicinity.
That's right.
To draw the eye to the lights and flashes.
They want to keep you. They want to keep you in the facility.
Yeah.
So we've learned a lot.
We learned a lot
doing this, and overall, I would say we had a good time. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
We did have a good time.
Yeah. I'll tell you what the best time was when we hooked it up, wet, dry, wet, and just sort of stupidly looked at one another with jaw agape. That was the good time.
And we had all 3 amps very loud.
Yes.
And just played some riffs.
That's right. We pulled out that Ian Thornley signature Sir.
Yep.
It was pretty dope.
The second best guitar in the building.
That's right. Kids, do you want to guess what he thinks the first best guitar is?
You mispronounced nose.
All right, so we're going to walk through this and probably digress a little bit on some technical aspects that we did probably mostly here. But Eric, walk us through it.
Yes, in preamp effects, because so this box will do mono. It'll do mono in front of a deluxe, no effects loop amp. It'll do mono in front of a amp with an effects loop,
like the EVH yes. 5150.
It'll do stereo with or without an effects loop. It'll do wet, dry, wet with or without an effects loop. So it'll do a lot of things. So it has to serve a lot of masters.
This was sort of, as we were talking about this thing, there was several moments where it was just like, wait, is that what we're doing? Yes, that's what we're doing.
We had to do a list of the different states that this
yes.
thing could need to be in,
so
and how to...
Really, there's 4 states. There's wet, dry, wet. There's 2 options. wet, dry, wet, with effects loop or without. You combine those in all the possible ways, you get 4 states. So that's what this does. So it could be a deluxe or Princeton, and then you can put everything, all the stereo, the left, the right, and the dry all goes mono into that. Or you can go something with an effects loop like a 5150 and use the 5150 preamp, and then mix left, right, and dry all mono to the return of that amp. Or you can do wet, dry, wet with or without the main amp, the tone amp, I would say, having an effects loop or not. And if you're not using an amp with an effects loop, you can use this to cop the vibe.
Yeah.
At least that's the idea. All right, so that was digression number 1.
Yes.
So we got to input before we got diverted. What happens after that?
So essentially it's wah, and there's a tuner here, which I believe this is the exact model that was used during the Hagar era.
Yeah, I believe so.
Because it didn't just come out.
It's a little known fact that was essential.
Yeah.
To that era.
Van Halen, I'm going to say Van Halen a lot. Phase 90, flanger, drive, and then we are out of the preamp effects.
Yes.
So that gets sent out. And then
potentially, yeah.
Potentially. Well, it gets sent to the box and then comes
yes.
back, and then the box will route however we need to. And then in the loop of the amp is, start out with a gate. Because ideally, if you're going to have an effects loop, put your gate in your loop, because it's going to clamp down your preamp noise.
And we set that pretty not aggressively, and it makes a big difference.
Oh, it does make a big difference. And this one's pretty good about the way it grabs and releases is pretty musical.
Yeah,
I think.
I agree completely.
They have another one with a gate. We have, or a loop.
So you can sense pre.
Yeah. That is a roll of the dice, ground loop wise, though.
Can be.
Has been, has not always been.
So we have a tendency to try to avoid that if we can, just for want of, not because it isn't a good idea or you shouldn't try it. It's just since we're building rigs for other people, we can't really afford to try it in every circumstance.
Yeah. And many rigs have a microphone on the speaker in a professional setting, I should say, where somebody's going to say, hey, I got a buzz. And as a player, you don't want to hear that because you ideally would like to make music. You'd like to hear them say, hopefully, hey, that's a great part. You played a killer thing. That sounds good.
Yeah, and this is just an easy way to keep front of house off your back or just not feel obnoxious or whatever. Yeah. So gate,
very fancy pedal here.
So we custom made this. Andy needed a boost. He said, I just need 3.5 dB, and if you want, you can do a 5 dB too. So we did this very old school looking boost. I bought a Dymo labeler to do this.
And notice how he cut stuff just a little bit off.
Yeah.
Put it on just a
that's not because of
crooked.
That's not because of incompetence.
Yeah,
I'm an artist.
Was very much on purpose.
Right. So we got the biggest switch we could get for 3.5 to 5 dB. We got the biggest LED we could get. So when you hit that, there's like no question whether you're boosting or not.
That LED just makes me laugh. It's 10 millimeters.
It's
guys.
10 millimeters.
That's
guys.
Twice the size of a regular one.
I should have done a little label here that said LED.
Yeah, put another sticker on there that says bypass or on-off.
Yeah, but it's got a, I thought about doing an on-off sticker right there. But it's in like an old school unfinished enclosure. So for fun, if, this is kind of an older school thing, if somebody in that era got something custom built, like maybe this is what it would look like.
Yeah.
Because it'd be some dude with a soldering iron and a Dymo labeler and some stuff that probably should not have ever been selected for this, that you just went down to the Radio Shack and bought.
Yeah, you'd have got a big switch, and we could have put a light switch on it. That'd have been hilarious.
Actually, that would have been good. Now I'm regretting this whole thing. So boost,
and then the fun begins.
Yeah.
So into here, and this has 3 outs that you can, well, when you plug 3 in there, it auto does it. Dry out, left and right. You can choose if there's dry in the left or right.
Mm-hmm.
Those 3, well, the dry feeds the interface.
Mm-hmm. That'll go out to the dry amp or be mixed into the mono.
Yes, it always goes out dry, or it can be mixed into left or mono. The right and left come out, go through the pitch, so you can pitch your delays up and down. And then that feeds this box, which allows you to set your wet level.
Right, so if you've got wet, dry, wet, you could kill your mix by running that all the way down, use your foot and gang that up, and you would be adding delay into the micro pitch out to...
Yes. And you might say to yourself, well, why do you need a wet level? You've got 3 amps.
Should I do that? Well, why would I need a wet level when you've got 2 amps?
Glad you asked that, Barry. So let's say you've got 3 amps going. You have, or 3 deluxes, you can say. They all have a volume knob on them. So you can mix yourself there. You don't need any control over the output of these. Now let's say you've got 3 5150s and you are plugging into the returns of the amps for your wets. Now those things are just wide open. You plug it in the return, you just get whatever volume it is.
There's not a post return master.
Yeah, so that is why you need some sort of control. This has a little knob on it, but I don't think it goes to 0. So easy solution here. Also, let's say you go mono, now everything's mixed together. You can get in here and do a separate patch where you adjust all your outs of your delays. But let's say you go to a mono patch on here where the delay is the same in either side. Now you've got twice the information being collapsed together.
Which may not be the same.
So now your delays are higher if they're the same and they're in phase. So yeah, you kind of need some way to control that wet.
Yeah, we actually found that after testing.
Yeah.
It was like, man, we're trying to think of all the scenarios that Andy might use this in, and kind of finding ourselves, man, this would be nice if, and then came back, brought it on the bench and tore it up a little bit and put it back together.
Yeah.
But when you come back to the interface, you'll see lifts for the ISO transformer outs, which is the dry and the right. And then this is sort of the magic one, which determines whether the left mono output has all the effects in it, or if it's just the left effects. If you're running wet, dry, wet, I showed that backwards. So if you're running wet, dry, wet, that would be up, and it would have just the left effects. If you're running so-called mono, it would have the dry, the left, and the right, so that you wouldn't be losing anything when you're running just 1 amp.
Yeah, and then you can mix in your effects to taste.
Yeah. So we'll probably shoot some video of this in the wet, dry, wet state, so you guys can see it like we saw it. It was pretty darn cool. So,
super cool.
Any final notes?
Well, I think that's it.
He screwed this wah down.
Yeah.
That's not going anywhere. And put a handle out there too, so it's like you could carry it by the wall or the handle.
Yep.
We didn't know exactly, since we don't normally do boards this way, we didn't know exactly how the paint would hold the dual lock long term. And the wah is sort of stressful, as heavy as it is.
Yeah, we did some testing in it. We feel confident about it, but that thing weighs a lot, and I don't want him to open up his case or whatever someday and this thing's laying over here.
Yep.
And all the paint's peeled up.
Yeah, so you can see we covered up most of the stripes. I think the cable adds a nice sort of feature.
Yeah.
And the pedals, cool. The pedals help it too.
It's not subtle, but it doesn't scream at you. I think somebody could see this from off stage and not realize that it's Van Halen for a moment.
Yeah,
I think and they say,
for a moment.
Oh, now I see.
Yep, and there you go. Strymon Zuma for power, and that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. It's a super cool board.
All right. Well, there you guys have it, and we'll talk to you soon.